Hey Collective, it's Alan. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be directed towards moving away a little bit from the divine union in the sexual term or in the term of mating to more of divine partnerships, which is a secondary group, if you will, that is coming together at this time. And I decided, since we all are in a 3D reality where we enjoy a lot of game thinking and a lot of strategy, that we would use that same premise to kind of look at the subject of partnerships in divine orchestration, right? And so what I wanted to do was talk about, let's say, a hypothetical situation where you're in a strategic game where you are playing against an opponent that you can't see. And the object of the game is to find your way through a maze, if you will, or find your way through darkness. And you have to resort to your own intuitive qualities in order to make your way through this little game. And one of the things that you find as you go is that you start to unlock doors that you didn't quite understand were going to be there. And they challenge your sense of right and wrong. So your game then becomes something of a little bit more of your own integrity and how you interact with the game itself, and how you as a player are viewed by whatever the opposing team that's playing the chess game against you is seeing you as. So your object of the game suddenly becomes to affiliate with others that are like-minded with you in this game, because you realize that you're against an invisible foe. And so as you're going along the way, you start to encounter different tests, different little scenarios of people that come into your life that are there either to help you or to make you fall. And you have to resort to your intuitive quality at most in order to progress through the game. Suddenly you find a stance where you are able to stand on your own, you have your own integrity, you have your own morals, you have your own ethics, but you find yourself hitting a proverbial wall over and over and over again. And suddenly you realize that you must be leveling up in the game. So what you start to realize is you start to look at the environment in a different context, and you start to realize that in order to get around this wall, you're going to need skill sets that you may not have. And so you start to actually have to rely on your past experiences as to who has helped you along the way and who has not. Have you unknowingly formed friendships or bonds with people as you went along the game? And so as you realize this, it suddenly dawns on you that there's always one individual that sticks out to you the most, the oddity, or the person that is most opposite to you, that suddenly grabs your attention because of the way that they've been able to navigate the course. Now, interestingly, in a divine partnership, that is what we would call a divine union partnership, where there's opportunity for both players to advance to the next stage and level up. But in order to do it, they must meet in the middle, and they must overcome the obstacle in front of them and turn it into an opportunity. So where we look at divine unions as far as in a partnership, as far as sexual and like we're going to marry each other and all that stuff, it is built in either oppositions that unite timelines and build a new future, or it's people that were built for each other that are meant to go and show what the divine love looks like. In divine partnerships, it can be all of the above and then relate to one topic, which is now people who come from different sides of the tracks that are both built to succeed and to level up, but they must get over ego. Okay, so then we get into a different situation where instead of it being just sexualized, now we're having to deal with competitive nature. Now typically, because they're opposing sides of the same equation, you're going to find that one is more simplistic and one is more extravagant. As they both look at the same wall, what they consider an obstacle, one will see it as an opportunity, one will see it as an obstacle, and it will flip once the partnership is formed, right? That's what a union dance is. So as you would play the strategic game, you would realize that you probably haven't always been the nicest to each other, because people, there's competitive quality here. And so you realize that there's been a lower expression of egoism there. And so you have to overcome the blushfulness and bashfulness of going to the other person and saying, hey, I think I need your help here. Or better yet, how about we just partner up because we seem to be on the same wavelength and we need to get around this wall. Because let's say that it's a war game and you have a lot of people that are depending on your leadership skills. But you realize that the divine, whatever the architect that created the game, is literally pulling people together that are built to make it, but as teams. So then you start to look at the individual and you realize that you're going to have to approach that person in the right context. But usually, it's a game. So let's put it very, very easy. The other person is going to be very receptive to the conversation as long as they're truth, blah, 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 blah. Again, integrity. It's a game about integrity and strategy. Okay, so then what inevitably ends up happening is that immediately in the person's vicinity that is having to reach out to the other person, or vice versa, whichever way it is, the immediate vicinity starts to show signs of stress, because when someone levels up, other people don't level up. And so there comes a point where suddenly you find people that used to be your ally are now your enemy or your foe, because they feel challenged by the fact that you are moving up and the other person is not moving up. So then you start to have to rely even more increasingly on that gut instinct that you had to get around this obstacle and turn it into an opportunity by diverting from that panel and moving towards your soul tribe, if you will. We're going to use it in spiritual terms because I'm a spiritual man. Okay, so now you have all of this going on, and what you don't realize is that the person that is bringing this interaction into the equation is meant to do that. It's part of the game of life in this little game. And what you don't realize is that it's the test. The person that is coming into the equation is the test by which you will find out which friends are true friends and which of them are allies or foes, because they are the instigator of change. Okay, so when that happens, you start to realize that other teams become aware of this individual party because of the fact that you have interest, or more importantly, they have interest, because they see that somehow they've been able to navigate without having to rely heavily on a lot of other people. And so that becomes very interesting to people. But here's the thing. Because of what's going on as a distraction around one party, what can happen is that they feel like they're losing their ability to reach out to this person because they've been waiting too long. And this person now has options looking at other things. But what you need to realize in strategy is that the person who is isolated and on their own, the lone wolf, is a strategist. So they will always pick the party that better suits their moral compass, their ethical fiber, the way that they see the world, what their goals are. And so they won't care who has bigger teams or who has more money. It'll always be based on, do they align with their truth. Then that person realizes, oh, that's why it's part of the game, is because if I reach out to this person, even if it's in secrecy or in quiet, they will help me navigate what is going on here, because they will be not involved. They will be literally removed from the scenario, so they'll be able to say what the warning signs, and I will be able to better judge the things around me. And so that creates like a little bit of secrecy, which adds flavor to the game. Now, the interesting part is that as these two individuals become unioned, if you will, in partnership, whether it's business or it's business in the scenario because you're trying to get over this obstacle and you're trying to level up to the next stage of the game. It's a game. And so what ends up happening is that they become very close to each other because they're having to rely on something that they can't see. What is it that the game is trying to get them to do, and why are they in particular being aligned this way? It adds a bit of mystery to the game, and it makes it much more exciting to the viewer, to anyone who's actually playing, or what I would say is the voyeuristic quality, where a lot of people are passive and are observing the game. Now, interestingly, what the two parties may not be aware of is the fact that the game itself in the next level has already a guard that stands behind the wall, and they're observing all of the teams as they approach this particular obstacle. When the teams finally form and they actually become union, you're going to notice that some of them are almost a little bit covert with their operations because they're already tied to other things. So what ends up happening is that it may be where one of the parties gets an ultimatum that if they follow this, because of course it comes out, if they follow this path, that they're done, that they're never going to be successful, that their team's going to fail, and blah, blah, blah. Well, here's the interesting part. A true strategic leader understands that if you have to resort to ultimatums or to threats in order to get someone to bow down to them, then it's already unequal and it's already a losing team. So the smart person would immediately do what? They would go with the other party, the one that is willing to be with everybody. Like the other person typically won't care. And so it's usually a tandem jump that they're about to make in order to jump the wall. So what ends up happening is that then they both start to realize that something bigger about the game is trying to bring these particular parties together. And though the outside players will do everything they can to dissuade them from coming into a union in terms of whatever they're going to do in the next level, that they realize immediately that there is more to the game than meets the eye. It went from a very practical, personal endeavor where you overcame things, and typically like one will be well off and one will be the underdog, and then that makes the perfect union in partnership for the next level. And so as we go through this, I started to realize in this simulation that I was having, it was a dream. In the dream that I was having, what I realized is that everybody else if not in the same vibration, become susceptible to the game being able to manipulate them into doing things that sabotage not just their own actions, but to sabotage the person who is a viable candidate for leveling up. And so it becomes a very interesting situation where you have to detach your emotional placement with situations in order to progress, because the next level, once the wall comes down, reveals that you now have to do a tit for tat with other leaders who made it over that wall. And so now it becomes a 100% detached from emotion strategic game, where the players that are now in a chess match that they didn't know that they would have to. Remember, when they came through, it was a war, it was a battle. They were going into battle. In spiritual terms, it would be like a spiritual battle or religious wars. But once you get past that, it turns out that in the game, in the simulation that I was dreaming about, that they actually became the chess players themselves, and they were now navigating and moving their teams that are following them in the same direction without violating the game's rules. And so that's what's of interest to the game, because as I said, there is a panel of people that are the architects to the game that are observing the players that do best at delivering information without violating rules, and who do it in a way that is very, very friendly, so that it helps other people who begin to follow the same track get up their mountains. And so I was thinking about this, and I was wondering about the divine unions that are sexual as well. Here's the thing, when you find yourself attracted to someone in that way, we tend to always compartmentalize between two parties. So we think that because it's a non-sexual relationship, that it's going to just be a business. But we neglect the fact that it can become best friends. And best friends are super powerful because they will always be there for each other. Whereas in a relationship where there's a male-female, male-male, girl-girl, whatever it is that is sexual, there can be a breakup. One of the strongest teams that can form are the best friends, because it's not just business, it's not just sexual, it's the best friend scenario. And what happens when those teams start to come together? Well, it starts to send towers and things start to fall around them, and that's part of the challenge of getting over this last wall. So when they finally get to be the chess players, and they're actually now able to make moves that other people will be able to follow, they must abide by the rules of the game. And that's what's of interest to us at this point. Is the divine universe helping us level up as a species? And if so, have we identified who the key players are to the game that's unfolding for the next phase? If we have, then it's paramount that they start to acknowledge each other and start to work with each other as much as possible. Because remember, in a divine orchestration, there's no good or bad. There is a balance factor. And so they have to be able to be diplomatic, and they actually preferably would have to like each other and respect each other. That's one of the things I've noticed in this divine union setup, is that there's a challenge between competitiveness, lower ego, and stuff like that. But if you overcome that, then it's about diplomacy, and it's about being able to deal with the truth of things, no matter how dark it can be, and bring light to it, understanding that there is a reason why it's there. Hence, the game of strategy. And I thought it would be a very interesting topic for today's wonderful video, because as we make our way through this leveling up phase, where a lot of the collective is now finding that the old world that they were part of is just coming down around them, they feel isolated, and they're being bombarded with either a lot of stimuli from news or things that recommend things that are not, you don't have to do these things, but they're removing your ability to think freely. So the strategists, the teams that are forming in divine union that are either sexual, friendship, or business, are now part of something bigger, and they're part of an orchestration that's part of the design. And so instead of competing with each other, I would recommend, in this game scenario that I had in the dream, what I realized is that partnerships and friendships are what we call soul tribes. And though life is not always a game, you do play at it. And the point is, are you a player, or are you being played? That is the question that all of us should be asking ourselves right now. There's a lot that's about to happen, I think, in what we call the real world. And I think a lot of us need to make that level up mentality of realizing you cannot do this next phase by yourself. The game is about to be shaken up. Allegiances, I believe, is the next level. But that's up to what you all think. That's it for me, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.